Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Five Guideposts to Connection. I'm your host, Lair Torrent, and this is week 4, choosing. But before we do that, let's take a look at our Five Guideposts to Connection map to see where we've been and take a look at where we're going. We talked about mindfulness, paying attention to our thoughts and our feelings, getting us out of our knee-jerk reactions, learning how to emotionally regulate. We've talked about in week 2, guidepost 2, we talked about the parts of self, the sides of us that show up most often in our relationship and how important those are to communication. And then last week, in guidepost 3, we talked about the narrative. And we talked about shining the light of awareness, mindfulness, guidepost 1, on the parts of self, guidepost 2, and the story that those parts like to tell, the narrative that those parts like to tell, and how crucial they are to how we see and experience our partners, because the narrative helps to build our belief systems around our partners and our relationship, and it even can affect our sex lives. This week, in Guidepost 4, we're going to talk about how to choose each other. Let's talk for a minute about how last week went. How was week 3? What did you discover about yourself? Were you able to turn the volume up on that narrative? Were you able to externalize it? Did you find any problematic narratives? Did you finish your homework? If you didn't, let's go back, start up after you're done. As always, we're going to talk about the what, the why, and the how, but this week we're going to talk about choosing. Our week 4 overview, we're going to talk, as I said, I'm going to give you a good definition of what choosing is, a compelling reason as to why to use it, and some really great skills on how to choose your partner better every day, all the time. Let's look at a definition of choosing. Choosing is loving someone in the unique way that they feel and experience being loved. What is choosing? It's a few things. It's romantic love, or love in action. Often love can be quite inert. Choosing puts wheels to and action to our love. It's something that happens in the small moments between partners, and it's a new way of thinking. Looking at choosing as romantic or love in action. It's romantic love or love in action because our actual needs begin to get met. Because there's actual doing happening and not just thoughts and feelings of love. We feel reached for. When someone loves us in the way that we like to be loved, we feel that they're reaching for us, that they're stretching in our direction. And in that, trust begins to build, which can then lead to deep and long-lasting intimacy. Choosing happens in the small moments of life between partners. It happens when no one else is watching. It's being the first to reach out after an argument. It's a date night planned without any real warning. It's a cup of coffee made exactly the way she likes it. It's a diaper changed in the middle of the night when you know that he's been up and done the last 3, and you tell him to go back to bed. I got this one. These are those moments of choosing. They're not the big Sony ball game Megatron proposals or even the day you got married. Choosing each other happens in these small moments when you feel truly reached for, truly cared for, and it's often these very small things that add up to mean so very much. I like to also say that choosing is a new way of thinking, because it says, I was actually thinking of you when you weren't here. And I feel like that's a really powerful statement to make in your relationship. It means that I've gone from a me-centered way of thinking to a we-centered way of thinking. And being able to shift our consciousness from me to we means that I'm attuning to my partner. I'm becoming very aware of what they're going through. I'm opening to their experience. There is a whole lot of compassion, empathy, and understanding in there. And so choosing, really being able to choose each other means being able to think in a new way. And it's being able to think of things in an us scenario instead of just a me. Why is choosing so important? Well, I say it's the cornerstone to romantic love, that it builds trust, and ultimately choosing creates intimacy. And there's also a science behind choosing, and that it creates an oxytocin feedback loop between partners. Choosing each other is the cornerstone of romantic love, and choosing is so important in a relationship because it sends the message in those little ways that I pick you. It says in those small ways that we talked about that I choose you, I love you. It says I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to show up and that you can count on me. Choosing each other, working this guidepost into your relationship helps you put action to your love. And so your love is no longer love inert. It's love in action. I will ask couples all the time. I'll say to one partner, I'll say, do you love her? And he'll say, well, of course. That's why we're here. What do you mean? I said, well, how would she know that? Well, because I think it. I feel it. I'm like, well, that's good for you, but how would she know that? She can't know that you love her because you're having all these warm and fuzzy thoughts and feelings. That's happening within you. We have to put feet to that and action to those loving thoughts and those feelings. And choosing is an amazing way to do that. Finding out how our partners feel picked, feel chosen, feel loved helps us know what to do in the moment to make them feel cared about. And when we do those things, when we make, and what we're finding is it's small sacrifices of time, energy, and money, it begins to build trust. Choosing also builds oxytocin. And this is the really compelling science behind Guidepost for choosing. You see, oxytocin is the love hormone. And after the dopamine blast of the new, couples will come running to see me because the dopamine's worn off, because dopamine's not sustainable in the brain. And what I offer them is oxytocin. And the way we create oxytocin is through choosing each other. When you feel picked, you feel chosen, you feel taken care of, you know you can trust. And oxytocin helps to fortify those bonds between us by creating an oxytocin feedback loop. So if I choose my partner in the way that she feels loved and cared about, not only does she get oxytocin, I get it from the doing. And then she, in like kind, will hopefully do something that makes me feel loved and cared about. I'll get oxytocin from getting that thing done. She'll get oxytocin from doing it. And as we create this feedback loop over the course of time, the bonds between us become fortified. They become stronger. And the couple and the relationship actually becomes stronger. Let's talk about how to choose well. Remember, it's not the big romantic comedy moments. It's shifting from a me-centered way of thinking to we. It's making our love actionable and active through small sacrifices. I like to give my couples in my practice what I call the love bank, for lack of a corny or therapeutic term. Everyone keeps score. We all like to say we don't. We do. Everyone keeps score. The only time you stop keeping score is when you feel so loved and cared about, when you feel so picked and chosen that you know that that's going to happen, that you don't have to keep your ledger out anymore. But we all have love banks. And choosing each other equals deposits in those banks. So if you're not making deposits, if you're not choosing your partner in the way that they feel loved and cared about, you're actually making withdrawals. And couples will come to see me and want to know how to build or rebuild trust. Maybe there's been a breach. Maybe there's been a major hurt incurred in the relationship. And what I like to say is, okay, so we've cashed a lot of that bank. And we need to be able to replenish the bank. And the way to begin to replenish the bank, that bank of love, is through acts of choosing each other. And what ends up happening is after deposit after deposit after deposit, eventually at some point, we reach this place called trust. And if we're both doing that, if we're both making deposits in that bank, we finally reach that place of trust. And when we do, we can finally have what we've all been looking for, and that's intimacy. Real, true, deep intimacy. And it's done through finding out how your partner feels loved and cared about and then doing those things. Choose them in the way they like and need to be chosen. Do you know how your partner experiences being loved? Are you sure you have that right? Do you love the way you like to be loved? A lot of people do that. We tend to, in that me-centered way of thinking, we kiss the way we like to be kissed. We hug the way we like to be hugged. We give the presents that we might like to get. And when we shift to a we shift out of the me, we can start looking on the other side and say, okay, how does this person uniquely feel love? And do those things. Ask yourself, what part of me comes to the choosing of my partner? If you're in a shutdown, if you're in a critical part of self, you're not going to have those warm and fuzzy feelings that are going to compel you to do the things that make that person feel cared about. What narrative do you tell about your partner? Because the narrative you tell affects your ability to choose well. Taking a look at what we've covered in week 4, we talked about what choosing is. We talked about why choosing is so important, gave you a compelling reason why to do it when you least want to. And we talked about how do we choose our partners. In sum, choosing does not happen in the big moments of life. It actually happens in the smaller, more mundane moments. I like to say when no one's looking. It means going from that me-centered way of thinking to a we-centered way of thinking. And choosing each other well builds and rebuilds trust. It creates oxytocin. It sends the message that I pick you, I choose you, I love you. And it's made up of those small sacrifices of time, energy, money, and I would probably add physical outreach or contact. And we must choose our partners in the way that they like to be picked and chosen. And so we have to know that language of love. If you want to know more about this particular guidepost, I would point you to Susan Johnson's work. She wrote a book out that she put out a while back called Hold Me Tight. She also founded Emotionally Focused Therapy. Her work's founded on the work of John Bowlby, which is all about attachment theory. And so if this particular idea blows your hair back, her work is really important to look at and really interesting. Her book is amazing, and I highly suggest you get it. Looking at homework for week 4, building on weeks 1 through 3. Use your newly learned skills from guideposts 1 through 3 to practice choosing. And this week, we're going to do the 2 lists exercise, or the love lists exercise. Try to do that immediately or soon after the video lecture. We're going to do the eye gazing techniques 3 times this week. We're going to look at mindfulness of choosing, the mindfulness of choosing exercise, as well as gratitude for your partner journal every day this week. Take a look at the accompanying ebook for these exercises and any directions that you might need. Wish you good luck in week 4. Choosing is really fun. I think you're really going to like it. I will see you back here. I'll see you back here next week for our 5th and final guidepost, the guidepost of personal responsibility.